So today we have the last three verses of chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita lined up. I'll start with verse number 33. Yatha sargatam sokshamayadaha akasham nopalepyate सर्वत्रावस्थितो देहे यथात्मानोपलेप्यते. So the verse translates to, as the all-pervading space or ether is not tainted due to its subtlety, so also the self seated in the body everywhere is not tainted. So let's take this up word by word. Yatha is as, Sarvgatam is all pervading. Sakshamyat, Sukshma is subtle. Sakshmayat becomes from subtlety. Akasham is space or ether, na not. Uplipyate is tainted. Sarvatra everywhere. Avasthita is seated. Dehe is in the body. Tatha so Atma, that Paramatman, God. Na not uplipyate is tainted. So the grammatically correct English translation is, as the all-pervading space is not tainted due to its subtlety, so also the self seated in the body everywhere is not tainted. Let's chant it together. Yatha sarvgatam sokshamayadaha आकाशं लोपलेप्यते सर्वत्रावस्थितो देहे तथात्मानोपलेप्यते. So see, the previous verse said that God is situated in the hearts of all living beings as the supreme soul. Not only the previous verse, and I mean also some verses before that we had said the same thing. And though God enables everything, it never identifies with the body or is not affected by the body's states of existence. So God is there in all beings, but it itself does not act, nor is it affected by the actions of the beings. So when we talk of, the law of karma, they apply to the beings and not to God. God only enables the beings to act. And so God is that imperishable, dwelling in the perishable bodies. God remains untainted. So I think Krishna knew that this is a concept which not only Arjun, but even people like us will find difficult to internalize. So he's presenting a simile, and he's also giving the logic in that simile to explain the same thing. Okay, so this example is of ether or space. And what is the logic? That gross cannot condition or affect the subtle. Now, amongst the Panch Mahabhut, or the five great elements, space or Akash is the subtlest, and it is all pervading. So, space actually accommodates all things, be it a house or a fragrant smell or a distasteful smell or a heap of rubbish. All this is accommodated in space, yet nothing that it contains, nothing that space contains contaminates it. Fragrance or smell are at the level of the air. The air carries that smell or fragrance, but not space. So air is fragrant, but space continues to be uncontaminated. Space accommodates filth, but is not contaminated by it. Space also could be accommodating a divine object or a Havan Samagri, but with that, it does not become divine. It remains space. It is not affected by what it is accommodating. It is the air which gets contaminated or the earth that may be getting polluted, but the space does not get contaminated. And why is that happening? Because it is so subtle that none of the gross things can touch it, can defile it. So a simple example, if we look at even our body, see, between our thoughts and our emotions and our physical body, which is the most subtle? Or okay, let me just put two things.
Thoughts.
Our thoughts are the most subtle, even emotions are subtle, right?
Yeah.
Now, if there is a fire there, I can burn my finger, the gross body, but the fire cannot burn my thoughts. We never use the expression that my thoughts got burned. We say, I got burned, that it means that some part of my body got burned. So fire is gross, thoughts are subtle, right? So the gross element is not able to touch the subtle element, a subtle part, subtle layers. Now, God is subtler than even space. And though it is enabling and dwelling in each one of us and all that we see around us, it itself is not contaminated by what we are doing. It remains immaculate. So, though it is pervading the entire body, mind, and intellect, but being subtler than all this, the body, mind, and intellect, it remains unaffected. So, the pure consciousness, though pervading the entire body and enabling the body, it remains unaffected by any of the activities that the body is performing or the activities that God is supporting. I mean, so that Paramatman is supporting, but it is not affected. So God pervades all, but nothing pervades God. God remains immaculate because it cannot be tainted by anything that is gross. Moving on to the 34th verse. यथा प्रकाशयत्येकः कृत्स्नं लोकमिमं रविः क्षेत्रं क्षेत्री तथा कृत्स्नं प्रकाशति भारतः. As the one sun illumines this whole world, so does the God illumine the whole Kshetra, O Bharat. So another beautiful verse. Let's take this up word by word. Yatha is as Prakashyati, illuminates or illumines. Actually, illumines is the correct word. Illumines, ek, one. Kritsnam, the whole. Lokam is world. Imam, this. Ravi is a name for sun. And Kshetram is field. The Kshetri is actually the knower of the field. And knower of all the fields is being called Kshetri here, which is the lord of fields, all fields. Tatha, so, Kritsnam is whole, Prakashati illumines, Bharat is a name for Arjun that Krishna is using in this verse. So the verse translates to, as the one sun illumines this whole world, so does the soul illumine the whole Kshetra field, O Bharat. So let's chant it together. Yatha prakashayatyeekah kritsnam lokamimam ravi kshetram kritsnam prakashyati bharata. So see, in the previous verse, Krishna had given the example of ether. To make us understand and drive the point home, he is giving another example. And now he's giving the analogy of the sun. In the previous example, we had talked of space or ether, and we have just discussed as how the space is impervious, just as the space accommodates everything but is not contaminated by anything. Similarly, Paramatman is impervious to what is happening in the world. Now we take the analogy of the sun illuminating or illumining the entire universe. So the verse says that just as one sun illumines this whole world, so does one Paramatman, consciousness or knower of the body, illumines the entire body, the Kshetra, and the multitude of bodies. So the entire, all the beings. So the term being used is Kshetriya. So, and to support that, I will just ask you to go back to verse number 3 of this chapter, which mentioned that know me as the knower of the field in all the fields. And verse number 17 said that Paramatman is undivided, yet exists as if divided in being. So that Paramatman is one whole. You know, it's not that like the Paramatman within me is different from the one within you. I mean, it's not a part of that self. It's the whole self which is there in all of us. Okay. So the example now that is coming to our that we are discussing is the sun. The how Paramatman is the same, is like the sun. As the points of comparison are as a source of illumination. So you see, the sun is always emanating sunlight. That is the nature of sun. It's not that sun is putting in effort to give us light. No, sun is ever effulgent. So it is shining because that is sun's nature. Similarly, God's nature is consciousness. That is what God's nature is. And it gives consciousness to all the beings that it is supporting. Just as the sun is throwing or giving sunlight on everything that it comes its way, whatever is there, it's illumined. Second point is that just as the sunlight or sun is not affected by the qualities of what is being illumined, similarly, God is not affected by the qualities of the being in which the consciousness is being given or is being enabled or is being provided. Now, I would like to highlight the importance of sun in our scriptures. And even as we've been reading the Bhagavad Gita, you will recollect that a lot of verses we keep coming back to the example of sun. And even when we are talking of Brahman, one of the attributes is like the sun, ever effulgent. So we must pause to think why sun is so important in our scriptures or in the Indian tradition. So sun is the basis of all life on this planet. Further, the movement of the sun. Now, this is both rotation and the revolution around Earth's revolution actually around the sun, both of them, which generate day and night and the seasons, are critical and crucial for the development of beings. And this we had discussed while we were doing the Akshar Brahm Yoga, chapter 8. Also, the sun is the basis of our daily Nitya cycle or the daily terrestrial cycle. That means we rise with the sun's rise and we sleep with the sunset. Okay, human beings with our advancements in, we can go to sleep at sunrise and get up later. But the idea is that like the entire creation, we should also get up with the sun. And we used to do that and go to sleep with the sundown or sunset. And this controls our daily activity cycle, because once you get up, you start your day following your exercise regime, then coming, getting ready, going to work, coming back, and so on and so forth. The night time is normally the time for recreation and the other tamasic activities. This we had discussed now in chapter 9 in detail. So just as the sun, the illuminator, is not connected with the qualities of what all it illuminates, the Paramatman or Kshetri illumines everything, but is not affected or not tainted by what it illumines. Or just as the sun is the eye of all the people, that means it is in the sunlight we are able to see clearly. But the sun itself is not affected by the material faults of our eyes or our equipment. Similarly, the Paramatman, which is within all beings, is not affected by the ailments or the badness of the individual being or the sufferings of the material world. And just as, so, I mean, this actually boils down to that daily activity cycle that we were talking about while discussing the importance of the sun. So just as the sun is not affected by our daily cycle, so the Paramatman is not affected by our entire set of actions in our whole lifetime on a particular day at a particular time. Any of these actions, they don't affect God. So God is there in all beings, but it itself does not act, nor is it affected by the actions of all the beings. This is what we had done in verse number 32. So that same thing is being impressed upon us in verses 33 and 34. And also, see, soul is different from the body. And that is what we have learned in this chapter, how to peel off the layers, material layers from us. Kshetra from the kshetragya. So soul is different from the body because then only can it know the body. So then only can it become the kshetragya or the knower of the body. The body or the kshetra is the object of knowledge. And it is different from the kshetragya, which is actually the Brahman, Paramatman. Just as the illuminating sun is totally different from the illumined world. It's completely different. And of course, Krishna is referring to Arjuna as Bharat. And I think today we can recap as to why Bharat is important. It's made by the union of Bha and Rat. The Sanskrit word Bharat is made from the union of Bha and Rat, which means light. And Rath means, Bha means light, and Rath means someone who revels in light. So Bharat means someone who seeks and revels in light. And when it applies to a nation, it means that the entire nation is actually looking and reveling in the search of light, which is the search of knowledge. And when Arjuna is being referred to as Bharat by Krishna, it means that Krishna is reminding Arjuna that you are of that lineage of the great Bharat dynasty, and therefore it does not behove you to be so depressed on the battlefield and moving away from what you are rightfully should be doing. So it is basically to inspire Arjuna. So that was verse number 34. Now verse number 35. I will chant. Kshetra kshetragyorevam antaram jnana chakshuscha bhuta prakriti moksham cha ye viduryanti te param. So the verse translates to they who with the eye of wisdom perceive the distinction between the kshetra, field, and the kshetragya, knower of the field, and the liberation of beings from prakriti, matter. They go to supreme. So let's take this up word by word. So the first one is kshetragyo. So that becomes of the field and knower of the field, or of kshetra and kshetragya. Evam, thus antaram, antar is to have a distinction, antaram becomes distinction. Gyan chakshusha, gyan is knowledge, chakshu is eyes. So gyan chakshusha becomes by the eyes of wisdom. Bhut prakriti moksham, bhut is beings, prakriti matter, moksha is liberation. So bhut prakriti mokshan becomes liberation of beings from matter or from prakriti. Cha, and ye, those who vidu know yanti go, te they param, to the supreme. So they who with the eye of wisdom perceive the distinction between the kshetra, field, and the kshetragya, knower of the field, and the liberation of beings from prakriti, matter, they go to the supreme. So let's chant it together. Kshetra kshetra gyurevam antaram jnana chakshusha bhuta prakriti moksham cha ye veduryanti te param. So now this is the concluding verse of the chapter. And we are concluding with what Krishna had promised in verse number 3 of this chapter. As there he told us that he will explain to us clearly as to how to distinguish the matter and spirit, and also tell us what is to be known, Geyam. So, matter and spirit, and what is to be known. So, see, once we inculcate in our quest for truth, when we start inculcating the 20 qualities of the Jnani, which we had covered from verses 8 to 12 of this chapter, and the seeker continues on the spiritual path, we reach the stage when, we covered the last topic, last few verses. At that point, we are able to contemplate. And all this leads to the opening of the eye of wisdom, or our spiritual enlightenment. So we get the divine sight, and beyond what physically we see, we are able to see the presence of that Paramatman everywhere. So the divine sight gives a magical appearance to this humdrum world and mundane existence. Also, we understand that what is matter and what is the enlivening force behind the matter, or, when we are perceiving someone else. So we are able to distinguish not only our matter from our soul, but also anything that we behold, we are able to differentiate matter from spirit. And following this process of separation or extraction of matter from spirit, we start moving to our essence. And once we do that, we are liberated, because now we are not identifying with what is perishable. You see, matter is perishable, or the body is perishable, but the soul is not. So we come out of the womb of matter and escape death, or the cycle of birth and death, or we awake from our dream and reach the transcendental, and we expand and attain the supreme. So with that, we end today's session.